Celeste is a precision platformer designed by developer Matty Thorson and published by Extremely OK Games. I've got a few hours in the game, and recently I've been playing it a lot more often, so I thought now would be the perfect time to talk about it in my growing game review series. As per usual, there will be 4 categories to judge the game on, being gameplay, design, story, and music. Also, there will be spoilers for the game included, specifically within the story segment, so if you don't want that, then either skip that part of the video, or just go play the game yourself. So without wasting any more time, let's talk about Celeste. Simply put, Celeste has some of the most enjoyable and satisfying gameplay in any game I've ever played. Like I said before, the game is a precision platformer, and I'd even argue that out of all the platformers I played, it's definitely on the higher end in terms of difficulty, which can sometimes lead to very annoying gameplay, but for the most part, I never found myself getting frustrated with the challenges the game provided. The player's moveset is fairly simple, being composed of walking, jumping, climbing, and an 8-way directional dash. But there's so many advanced tricks hidden in these 4 moves, like wall bouncing, super and hyper dashing, wave dashing, spike jumping, and the list goes on. These tricks allow the game to balance a simple moveset so new players don't get intimidated, with enough cool nuances and advanced movement to keep experienced players hooked. I mean, this game did become one of the most popular games to speedrun for a reason. Also, why does Subway Surfers have 18,000 total players? How do you even speedrun Subway Surfers? Not only are the controls great, but the level design in most cases is really creative and provides a good challenge without getting too unfair. One of my favorite parts of the design is how some areas feel almost like a free roaming game, with the Forsaken City and Old Site in particular having a lot of intertwined pathways that encourage the player to explore the whole area instead of just going straight to the end. Another thing I love is how challenging the game gets in some of the later areas. One of my least favorite things in a game is when it offers little to no replay value after you've completed the main story, but Celeste doesn't have this problem, with its inclusion of the more challenging versions of the main areas, called B-Sides and C-Sides. There's also the final chapter, Farewell, which is by far the longest section of the game, and requires the player to utilize a lot of the aforementioned advanced movement to complete it, which I absolutely adore. Now, admittedly, there are some gameplay areas that I'm not really a fan of, like the windy section of the Golden Ridge, and most of the Mirror Temple if I'm being honest, but the number of great screens in this game definitely make up for the few and far between bad ones. Overall though, I think the gameplay in Celeste is fantastic, and definitely its biggest strength as a game. As for the design in Celeste, I think it's pretty solid. The majority of the game is done in a traditional pixel art style, which while is nothing special, is still a good style to opt for in a platformer in my opinion. Some of my favorite looking areas include the Golden Ridge for the phenomenal coloring used, and the final chapter, Farewell. I really just like the little things, like the gradient used on the spikes and the random floating objects used in the background. I think it's a really nice touch. I think my favorite part of the game's design though, is just the way it effortlessly combines different art styles together. For those who don't know, the game actually isn't exclusively pixel art. The cutscenes and characters are usually presented in a fully drawn style, which leads to some absolutely stunning portraits. There's also the map, which is done using mostly 3D rendered polygons. It's really simple, but it might be my favorite style of the main 3. It just adds so much weight to each area of the game. So while the design of Celeste might not be outstanding overall, I still think it's perfectly serviceable for the game and has some really good and unique qualities. It is still probably the game's weakest aspect though. So before we fully talk about the story, I just want to mention again that this segment will contain major spoilers for the game, so if you don't want the story spoiled, just skip this part of the video. In Celeste, you play as Madeline, a young woman with the goal of climbing all the way to the top of Celeste Mountain. As she climbs up, she eventually comes face to face with a doppelganger of herself, known as Madeline, who tries to stop her from climbing to the top. We then learn later in the game that Madeline has been suffering from depression and anxiety, and that she wanted to climb the mountain as a challenge to herself. But unfortunately, the magic of the mountain somehow created Madeline to be a physical representation of all of Madeline's fears and insecurities. So now, Madeline must face not only the natural obstacles of the mountain, but the obstacles within herself as well. Firstly, Let me just say how much I appreciate the effort put in to make a good story for this game. Because let's be honest, for platformers like Celeste, a complex story is not really necessary for the game, so the games that do go out of their way to make really good and impactful stories, I respect a lot more. But even without the outer context of the game, the story of Celeste is pretty great. Its overall plot is interesting and has a satisfying resolution, with Madeline and Badeline teaming up to climb the mountain together at the very end. I also like all the side characters like Theo, Mr. Oshiro, and even the old woman, and I think they all add a lot of unique flavor to an otherwise kind of predictable narrative. If I had to pick a favorite aspect of the story though, it would be how it intersects with the gameplay in interesting ways. Some examples of these include the chase between Badeline and Madeline in Chapter 2, with Badeline mimicking all of the players' movements. I thought that was pretty cool. There's also the final showdown against Badeline in Chapter 6, which has some great music to accompany it, and the way that when Badeline and Madeline reconcile, Madeline literally levels up and gets a second dash. I think that's a really cool little detail. So while it's definitely not the greatest video game story I've ever seen, nor is it even the best part of the game, Celeste's story is still a great aspect of the game, and something that really makes it stand out from other platformers, which I have to respect. Honestly, there isn't that much to talk about regarding the music of Celeste, other than saying that it's fairly good. One of the biggest pros with the music is just how well it blends with its respective area. Like the eerie and somewhat sinister track used in the Mirror Temple just matches perfectly with its aesthetic, as does the intense tune used during the Chapter 6 boss fight. It really adds to the awesomeness of it. And I would be remiss to forget to mention the absolute bangers that are the B-side tracks. So remember when I was mentioning the B-side challenges in this game? Well, they actually are backed with literal B-sides to the main tracks in the game, and they all slap. My personal favorites have got to be the jazzified remix of the Mirror Temple's theme, and the fast-paced synthy remix of the Celestial Resort's theme. Seriously, great job to the producers of these B-sides, they're easily the best tracks in the game. But yeah, that's about all there is to the music in Celeste. Definitely some great tracks in here, but most of them are pretty standard in my opinion. So overall, I think Celeste is a pretty fantastic game. Like I've already mentioned, the gameplay is phenomenal and will keep me playing for years to come. The design is also pretty good with its varying styles, the story is pretty satisfying and impactful, and the music all ranges from serviceable to absolute slapper. Truly my only real complaint would be some of the gameplay being mildly annoying, but other than that, really nothing but praise from me here. So if you're interested in playing the game, there will be a link in the description to its Steam page. It's $20, but in my opinion, it's absolutely worth the money. Oh, also, I'm going to be assigning a numerical ranking to all the games I review in this series from now on. So for me, Celeste gets an 8 out of 10. Alright, so that's all I got for this one. Like always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to catch my next uploads. Also, if you want to see more reviews I've done, check out my full game review series playlist. The link is in the description. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching.